Atletico Madrid thought they had killed Julián Álvarez's escape. Then, Álvarez dropped a bombshell of his own. The club refuses to let him leave. Their star striker has now pushed the conflict into dangerous territory. So what did Álvarez just do that could force Atletico into the decision they desperately wanted to avoid? Let's find out. Julián Álvarez is due back at Atletico Madrid after his post-World Cup break, and one of the ugliest transfer battles of the summer is about to move straight into Diego Simeone's dressing room. Atletico expect their striker to return and continue preparing for the season. Álvarez has already told the world that he wants something completely different, and those words are the bombshell Atletico cannot erase. During the World Cup, Álvarez finally made his position public. He confirmed that discussions about his future had already taken place inside Atletico. Then, he delivered the sentence that changed this entire story. He said a transfer would be the best solution for everyone. He also spoke about pursuing his dream. This was no anonymous transfer rumor. Álvarez himself had publicly opened the exit door. Atletico immediately slammed it shut. And that is where the conflict truly begins. Diego Simeone wants Álvarez in his team. Atletico consider him one of the central pieces of their project. His contract runs until 2030 and contains an enormous €500 million release clause. Contractually, Atletico have enormous power. Álvarez has something Atletico cannot control so easily. He wants out. And the destination hanging over this entire fight is Barcelona. Barcelona have pursued Álvarez and remain closely connected with his future. Arsenal have also appeared in the transfer story, while other European giants have been linked with him. Yet Barca is the club that creates the real problem for Atletico. Selling Álvarez to Barcelona would strengthen a direct domestic rival. Atletico have made it very clear that they have no desire to help that happen, and their resistance has become extraordinary. Atletico officials have been reported as unwilling to sell even for figures reaching €100 million, €150 million, or €200 million. Think about what that means. Álvarez publicly wants a transfer. One of Europe's biggest clubs wants him. Potential offers could reach 9 figures. Atletico still refuse to open the door. So how do you escape a club that refuses to name a price? That is the nightmare Álvarez now faces. Barcelona have continued searching for a way through. Deco has reportedly been involved in renewed efforts surrounding Álvarez, and the pressure has continued despite Atletico's resistance. The relationship between Atletico and Barcelona has become so poisonous that Atletico have even challenged Barcelona's conduct surrounding the pursuit. This has moved far beyond an ordinary transfer negotiation, and Álvarez is standing directly in the middle of it. He has also been careful with his public language. He has spoken about leaving. He has spoken about his dream. He has avoided publicly announcing that his destination must be Barcelona. That distinction matters. Saying, "I want a transfer," creates pressure. Saying, "I only want Barcelona," could start a war. And Atletico know that sentence could still come. Before we continue, subscribe to the World Cup Whistleblower, because Álvarez is now returning to the club that refuses to grant his wish, and the next stage of this conflict could become far uglier than anything we have seen so far. Now comes the confrontation that could decide everything. Álvarez is expected to return to Atletico and face Simeone again. He can reintegrate into training, prepare normally, and continue as one of Atletico's most important players. But what happens if he decides talking is no longer enough?
What if Álvarez decides to play dirty? What if he refuses to train? What if he suddenly reports an injury? What if that injury is fake and keeps him unavailable while his representatives continue fighting for a transfer? What if he formally tells Atletico that he will no longer accept their decision? What if his camp begins applying even more pressure behind closed doors? And what if he finally says the one word he has carefully avoided saying publicly: Barcelona? There is currently no evidence that Álvarez intends to fake an injury, boycott training, or go on strike. But desperation creates options. A player trapped inside a long contract has very few weapons once his club refuses to negotiate. His behavior, his availability, his public statements, and his willingness to cooperate can suddenly become part of the battle. Atletico can force Álvarez to remain registered with them. They can reject Barcelona. They can reject 150 million euros. They can reject 200 million euros. They cannot force Álvarez to be happy about it, and that could become Simeone's biggest problem. Álvarez is far too important to simply ignore. He scored 29 goals during his first season at Atletico and followed that with another major contribution the next year. With Antoine Griezmann gone, Simeone has even more reason to build his attack around the Argentine. Atletico need him motivated. Atletico need him scoring. Atletico need him committed. What happens if Álvarez gives them only the first two? That is where holding a player can become dangerous. A club may win the contractual battle and still create a dressing room problem. Every poor performance will suddenly be analysed through the transfer saga. Every frustrated reaction towards Simeone will become a headline. Every missed training session will raise questions. And imagine what happens if Álvarez suddenly becomes unavailable with a mysterious physical problem, while Barcelona are still trying to sign him. The accusations would explode immediately. Was he really injured? Was he protecting himself before a transfer? Was he putting pressure on Atletico? Was it simply bad timing? Nobody could responsibly claim he was faking without evidence. The speculation would still become brutal, and Atletico have created the perfect environment for that speculation themselves. They have blocked the exit. They have resisted enormous money. They have refused to strengthen Barcelona. They have decided that Álvarez stays. Now, Álvarez has to decide how far he is prepared to push back. At some point, somebody has to break.
Barcelona could walk away. Atletico could finally name a price. Álvarez could accept another season under Simeone. Or Álvarez could escalate. A formal transfer request would change the atmosphere immediately. Another public interview could put Atletico under fresh pressure. Naming Barcelona directly could destroy any remaining illusion that this relationship is repairable. Refusing to train would take the conflict into another category entirely. Faking an injury would make it poisonous. Again, none of those things has happened. The danger for Atletico is that Álvarez has already demonstrated his willingness to speak publicly. He has already said leaving could be best. He has already told Atletico what he wants. The next bombshell may require action instead of words, and that action does not necessarily need to be dramatic. One missed session, one transfer request, one sudden injury, one interview, one public mention of Barcelona. Any of those could turn a difficult situation into a full-blown crisis. Atletico currently believe they control this transfer because they control the contract. Álvarez controls something else: his cooperation, his performances, his public voice, and ultimately, his willingness to continue living with a decision he clearly does not want. That is the weapon Atletico cannot put a €500 million release clause around. Maybe he returns, trains normally, and starts scoring again. Maybe this entire conflict cools down once the season begins. That remains possible. But if Atletico reject him again after he returns, the situation becomes much more dangerous. Because then Álvarez knows exactly where he stands. No transfer, no Barcelona, no escape.
And that is when desperate players sometimes start creating their own exits. So does Julián Álvarez accept Atletico's decision and continue under Simeone? Does he push the club harder behind closed doors? Does he finally demand Barcelona publicly? Or does this transfer war become ugly enough for training sessions, injuries, and availability to become part of the battle? Atletico can keep rejecting offers. They can keep rejecting Barcelona. They can keep pointing toward his contract. The real question is how long they can keep rejecting Julián Álvarez himself.